Hi, my name's Phil and a warm welcome to Festool TV. Today I'd like to give you some information on the HK55 and the HK85. These are two pendulum cover saws from Festool. First of all, we'll start with the HK55. The big advantage of using a pendulum cover saw is that as soon as I push the saw forward, this pendulum cover will automatically retract. But here I have a lever, which means that as soon as this is pushed down, the pendulum cover will also go back. But when the saw is pushed forward onto the timber, then this will also start to retract. As soon as this pendulum cover goes back and I make the cut, there's a riving knife on the back here. And this means that when I'm working with solid timber, that riving knife will prevent the timber from closing up on the back of the blade. And this means that I can work in complete safety. On the front of the saw here, there's two red marks. And this means that I can make my pencil line, or I can make a line as to where the cut needs to be. And I can use these two lines to line up exactly where the blade is going to be cut. And I can see exactly down here, which means I also know exactly where my kerf line will be. On the back of the saw here, if I undo this screw, we can then angle the saw over. But we can go past 45 degrees and we can go to 50 degrees with the HK55. So I can cut a wide range of angles with this machine. But the other big advantage of working with this is that we can obviously vary the depth of cut that we carry out. So I can also use this saw for plunge cutting. On the back of the saw with this green lever, I can bring the green lever up to the grey section. As soon as we bring these two together, I can then adjust the depth of cut. And on here I have a mark for working with the guide rail and also a mark for working off the guide rail system. So if I bring the green lever up to the grey, we can then set the depth of cut to 50 millimetres. On top here there's another lever. When I push this one down, it means then the whole body of the saw will come up and then we can be in a position to make the plunge cut. So as soon as I push down on here, we can then bring the saw up into position. And the big advantage with the HK55 is that we can use this with the FS guide rail system. We put the saw into where we need to work. Whenever you make a plunge cut with a saw, it's always a good idea to use the anti-kickback stop. And when working with the Festool guide rail system, the big advantage is with this channel along here, I can place an anti-kickback stop on here, and so the chances of the saw suffering from kickback have been eliminated. So now the saw is being set up for a plunge cut, I can then, when I switch the machine on, I can then plunge down, but you can also notice that the pendulum cover starts to come back automatically and the riving knife is in the correct position as well. So at this point I can make the cut. When the cut has been completed, I can then push down on the lever on the top and then the saw can come out again. So long as I don't adjust the depth of cut, I can then carry on making repeat cuts. So applications for cutting out flooring, for example, means I can set the saw from one occasion and we can use a guide rail system to make any aperture cutouts that we need to complete. But when working with the HK55, because this is mains powered, of course, it's plug-it lead compatible as well. And if I can work with mains power, it also means I can work with dust extraction as well. So a 27mm hose on the inside, or for really great extraction, I can use a 36mm hose on the outside of the HK55. But the big advantage also of working with the HK55 is that we can use this with the FSK guide rail system. If you bring the two together, of course the big advantage is once these two are attached, it means I can make cuts at 90 degrees or any other angle that I choose to. It means I can work in a quick, easy and fast way for angle cuts and also for cutting any type of pre-planed timber to size and for cutting accurately at all times with the FSK guide rail system. As soon as the saw goes forward on the FSK guide rail, you can see again the pendulum cover will automatically come back. And of course, the FSK guide rail will also retract and bring the pendulum cover back with it. So working with this type of system with a 1200 watt motor for many different types of applications. It means we have a powerful saw for quick, easy, fast cuts with the FSK rail, but also for working with our FS rail system also. But of course, not all timber is going to be of 55 millimetres, of which the HK55 will be the maximum depth of cut. When it comes to using thicker sized timbers, it means we need a saw with a much greater capacity. And this is where the HK85 fits what we want to do. The HK85 has a much more, has a 2,300 watt motor, so I have a lot more power going through it. But again, we have the benefit of working with a pendulum cover as well. So when I push down on the lever, again, the pendulum cover will come back, expose the blade, and then we can start working with our guide rail system as well. On the front and also on the back with the HK85, we have two red marks. This will be the cut line the saw is going to make. So if I'm using the HK85 freehand, it means I've got two marks, one at the front and one at the rear, in which to line the saw up with my cut to keep my cut nice and straight while we're working. Because the HK85 has a much bigger capacity, we also have a greater range of angles to work with as well. So when we undo this screw here, we can angle this over to 60 degrees, which means we have a wide range of cutting options when working with the HK85. So the HK85 has a cutting capacity on the guide rail of 80 millimetres, and off the guide rail will cut 85 millimetres. But with the HK85, we also have the ability to plunge. And on the back here, with this lever, I can bring the two together, and then we can set our depth of cut. So now we can set the depth of cut to, say, 70 millimetres. I have a mark here which I can use as a guide. And then with the lever on this inside edge, I can push down on here, and then we can raise the saw up from the main sole plate. I can then put the saw onto my guide rail, I can bring the pendulum cover back. So now the saw is set to work off the FS guide rail system. I can make the cut into position, and then we can take the saw along, complete the cut, and with the lever on the inside of the cover, we can push down on here, and then we can bring the saw out of the cut. With the 2,300 watt motor, we also have variable speed. So I can use this on a variety of materials, but also we have a series of blades available to work with different materials as well. The HK85 comes supplied with a 24 tooth blade, and this is good for most types of applications. But if I want to rip a piece of solid timber, such as this example here, I need to swap the blade out for a panther blade. And the big advantage of using this type of blade is that because we have a positive pitch on the tooth, it means that I can cut very cleanly. I can also then, with this blade, dispose of the material that's being cut. So then we can work with the correct blade, the correct machine for the correct application. Changing blades on the HK saws is very simple. Bring up the fast fix lever, and then in here we have the Allen key to remove the blade. You can put the saw onto its side, and then with this centre nut, we can use the Allen key to undo. And then because the blade is turning in this direction, I just have to remember that I turn the Allen key in the direction of cut of the blade. We can then bring the pendulum cover back, and then the blade can be removed. So the blade we're putting in is an 18 tooth panther blade. You can replace the washer onto the centre, and then the nut can go through onto the spindle. So now for ripping material, I've got the correct blade to remove the edge along this piece of timber. We can put the Allen key back into the cover on the fast fix, and then we can close this into position. You may have noticed on the HK85 there's 4 marks on here. With the HK85 I can fit another block onto the spindle of the machine, and then this gives us the ability to cut rebates, grooves or trenches on a wide range of materials. So now the next stage is to set the saw up to cut onto the FS rail, and we can bring the depth of cut all the way up to its maximum capacity, and then as soon as the saw goes onto the guide rail, the pendulum cover will come back. So now the next stage is to fit the dust extraction, and then we can make our cut. So working with the HK85 to cut thick section solid timber with the correct blade means we end up with a great result at the end of it. But there's another big advantage to working with the HK range of saws, whether it's the 55 or also the 85. Because a HK85 will also fit onto the FSK rail system. So now, with the HK85 attached to the FSK rail, I can use the saw to cut deep section timbers for beams, and I can work quickly and accurately and make sure I have a really good quality of cut. So I hope this helps your understanding of working with the HK pendulum cover saws, and I'll see you again next time. Thank you.